In 2019, Red Bull and Honda joined forces and lit Formula One on fire. The partnership wasn't just successful, it was transformative. For Honda, it was redemption. Years of ridicule during the McLaren era were instantly forgotten when Max Verstappen delivered their first win together in Austria. And in a symbolic moment, the first thing Max did on the podium was point to the Honda badge. It was more than celebration. It was a statement. A message to the critics, to McLaren, and a public show of unity between driver and engine supplier. With that victory, Honda's reputation was repaired almost overnight. Reliability was no longer a question. Performance was no longer a question. In fact, the best compliment you could give them was that no one was even talking about their engines anymore. They just worked, exactly what you want from a power unit partner. In an ideal world, this alliance could have lasted a decade. Red Bull had the speed, Honda had the power, and together they looked untouchable. But Formula One is rarely an ideal world, and less than 2 years into their partnership, everything was about to change. Honda's shock exit. The problem with partnering with a major corporate giant is that you're always vulnerable to decisions made in distant boardrooms. And in 2020, two forces collided: the pandemic and Honda's corporate shift toward electrification. Then came the announcement Honda would leave Formula One after the 2021 season. The decision was sudden. No warning, no long goodbye. Red Bull and Honda had just started their journey and it was already over. As a compromise, Red Bull brokered a deal to keep Honda on as a technical partner until 2025. But they would now pay for the engines, which were rebranded for the first time as Red Bull powertrains. It wasn't ideal, but it allowed them to stay competitive. What made Honda's decision even more baffling was what came next. Less than 2 years later, after the 2026 engine regulations were announced, with their focus on synthetic fuels and increased electrification, Honda declared they would return to Formula One. By then, it was too late. Aston Martin swooped in and secured Honda as their full works partner for 2026. A role Red Bull had only recently enjoyed, the powertrain gamble. For Red Bull, standing still was never an option. In 2022, they invested millions into building their own powertrain facility in Milton Keynes. The move was bold. It gave them complete control of their future, but it also locked them into a new path. When Honda decided to come back, a reunion was impossible. Two fully separate engine divisions existed now. Honda's in Japan and Red Bull's in the UK. Max Verstappen summed it up best. They said they were going to stop, so we set up our own engine division. The timing couldn't have been worse. Even as a paid technical partner, Honda engines continued to bring success to Red Bull, meaning the original breakup had been unnecessary. But once the commitment to building their own engine was made, there was no going back. Now, the team faces 2026 with a brand new Red Bull Ford power unit. A complete unknown. It could be brilliant. It could be a disaster. Red Bull have hired experienced engineers, but without on-track history, it's a risk. And if it struggles, it could push Max Verstappen toward an established manufacturer like Mercedes. The brain drain. Engines aren't Red Bull's only problem. Since their latest era of dominance began, they've suffered a talent exodus unlike anything in their history. Key figures have left. Not just any figures, but the architects of their success. Chief Engineering Officer Rob Marshall, legendary designer Adrian Newey, Sporting Director Jonathan Wheatley, Max's longtime number one mechanic Lee Stevenson, Chief Strategist Will Courtney, all gone. And the most recent departures were tied to the firing of Christian Horner's close allies, including Director of Communications Paul Smith and Chief Marketing Officer Oliver Hughes. The loss of Rob Marshall in particular may have been underestimated. While Newey joined Aston Martin's long-term project, Marshall went straight to direct rivals McLaren. At first, Max played down the impact, saying Marshall hadn't been involved in the current car. But a year later, as McLaren surged into title contention, Verstappen admitted Marshall was making a difference. McLaren's season-changing Miami upgrade in 2024 bore his fingerprints. Team principals Andrea Stella and Zach Brown have openly credited Marshall for exceeding expectations. Proof that this wasn't just a routine staff shuffle. This was a brain drain. The political storm. To understand why so many senior figures left, you have to go back to the death of Dietrich Mateschitz in 2022. For almost 20 years, Dietrich had been the shield protecting the team from corporate politics. He gave Horner and Helmut Marko autonomy to run the team as racers, not as bureaucrats, but he also kept them in check. Everything ran through him, and crucially, it ran quietly. With his passing came a power vacuum. Suddenly, there was no single voice in charge. The Austrian corporate side became more assertive. The Thai majority shareholders began flexing their influence. Horner tried to consolidate his power, even moving to become CEO of both the race team and the powertrains division. And the Verstappen camp became more vocal than ever, politically aligned with Marko. The result? Factions, internal rivalries. A team once known as the most relaxed, least political outfit on the grid, the party team, was now consumed by boardroom battles. It's exactly the environment Adrian Newey once left McLaren to escape. The Red Bull of old gone. Had Mateschitz been alive, it's hard to imagine public feuds between Verstappen's father, Jos, and Horner spilling into the media. Dietrich disliked public drama. He solved disputes behind closed doors. Now, the disputes are front-page news, damaging the team's reputation and shaking its stability. The truth is uncomfortable. Everyone involved has played a part in this decline. Horner, Marko, Jos, and Max Verstappen, the Austrian board, the Thai shareholders. In chasing influence and control, they've created a politically toxic atmosphere that stands in direct contrast to everything Red Bull used to be. And in that environment, people leave. Some for rivals, some for a fresh start, some because the place they loved working no longer feels the same. What comes next? Red Bull are heading into 2026 with a brand new engine, without the man who designed many of their championship-winning cars, and without several key figures who made them a dominant force. They still have Max Verstappen, they still have the facilities, they still have the resources, but Formula One history is littered with teams who thought they could weather a storm, and couldn't. The coming years will determine whether Red Bull's gamble pays off or whether the past few seasons were the high point of an era now fading into history.